Hello everyone, and welcome to Mine Sweet Revenge. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from today? My name is Johnson, and this is not just a story. It is my life, a life where I wasn't treated like a son, but like a servant in my own home. For years, my parents believed appearances mattered more than love, more than respect, and certainly more than me. I grew up in a house that looked perfect on the outside. A neat lawn, polished windows, and the latest furniture my parents could afford. But behind those doors, the truth was very different. I wasn't the child they nurtured. I was the boy who kept the machine running. From the age of 12, I learned what it meant to scrub floors, wash dishes, run errands, polish the silverware, and prepare everything before important guests arrived. My parents didn't even hide it. They openly introduced me to relatives as the one who keeps the house organized. I laughed it off, but inside, I broke a little every time. Birthdays. I didn't celebrate mine. Holidays. I spent them carrying trays, setting tables, and cleaning up after everyone else's joy. My sister, meanwhile, lived like a princess. She got the smiles, the gifts, the attention. She represented the family in photos, while I stood behind the camera unseen. Still I worked. Still I obeyed. Still I told myself maybe one day they'll see me. Maybe one day they'll respect me, but that day never came. Instead, my parents grew obsessed with status. Their lives revolved around who they could impress: neighbors, extended relatives, business acquaintances. It was never about us as a family. It was about appearances, prestige, and the illusion of success. Then came the day that changed everything. My father received an invitation to host an exclusive business luncheon. It was his once-in-a-lifetime chance to connect with a powerful CEO who had recently expanded his company into our city. This man was influential, respected, and wealthy. My father was desperate to impress him. For 2 weeks, our house turned into a battlefield of preparations. My mother demanded new curtains, polished glasses, exotic dishes, and even small details, such as scented candles imported from abroad. And who had to make it all happen? Me, Johnson, the servant's son. The night before the luncheon, my father called me into the living room. His words cut sharper than any blade. "Johnson, tomorrow is the most important day of our lives. You will not embarrass us. Do your job, keep silent, and stay in the background. We only want important people around the table. Do you understand? Important people." That phrase echoed in my head all night. To them, I wasn't important. I wasn't even family. I was just staff. The morning arrived. Guests in expensive suits filled our home, laughter bouncing off the walls. My sister sat at the center of attention, smiling in her new designer dress. My parents beamed with pride as if they'd built a perfect empire, and me, I carried trays, poured drinks, adjusted the lights, and kept my head down. I was invisible, as always, until the CEO arrived. The room shifted when he walked in, tall, confident, with a voice that carried authority. My father almost tripped over himself greeting him, offering every courtesy possible. My mother fussed around him like a nervous maid. For an hour, I moved silently, making sure everything was perfect. And then something unexpected happened. The CEO paused, looking around the room. His sharp eyes scanned the space, the polished glasses, the carefully prepared table, the smooth flow of service. Then his gaze fell on me. "You there," he said, his voice firm. Everyone turned to look. For a moment I froze. My father's face drained of color. The CEO walked closer. "Who's responsible for all this?" "The arrangement, the timing, the service. It's running smoother than most professional events I've attended." I hesitated, glancing at my parents. My father's glare screamed, "Don't you dare!" But I had lived too long in silence. So I took a breath and said quietly, "I am, sir. My name is Johnson." The CEO studied me for a moment, then nodded. And with a smile that cut through the room like sunlight, he said the words that would change my life forever. "Well, Johnson, you run this place like a true leader. You're the real boss here." The room went dead silent. My father's lips trembled. My mother's forced smile collapsed. My sister's eyes widened. And me, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a servant. I felt seen. I felt valued. And little did I know, This was just the beginning of everything that would follow. The room was frozen. The CEO's words hung in the air like a lightning strike. "You're the real boss here." I could feel the silence pressing against my skin. My father's eyes burned with rage he couldn't show in front of the guests. My mother gave a stiff laugh, trying to brush it off, but her hands trembled as she rearranged plates that were already perfect. The CEO turned back to my father and smiled. "You've raised a capable young man. It's clear he has discipline, organization, and leadership. That's rare these days." My father forced a nod, the kind of nod that looked polite on the outside, but was boiling on the inside. He wanted the recognition, not me. He wanted to shine, but instead, the spotlight had landed on the son he treated like a shadow. Inside, my heart pounded. For years, I had been invisible, the background figure making everything run. But in that single moment, someone important, someone powerful, had seen me. And not just seen me, valued me. The luncheon continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. The CEO kept including me in his questions. "How do you manage such timing?" he asked when the dishes arrived seamlessly. "Who prepared this arrangement?" When he saw the decor balanced perfectly, every time, my father tried to cut in with a laugh, redirecting credit to my mother or to family effort. But the CEO kept circling back. He wasn't fooled. He could see. By the end of the event, when the CEO stood to leave, he shook my father's hand politely. But when he turned to me, he gripped my shoulder firmly. "Johnson, I can tell you're not just capable. You're reliable. People like you don't go unnoticed in my world. Remember that." My father's jaw tightened. My mother's forced smile quivered. My sister looked like she just swallowed a lemon. And me? For the first time in my life, I wanted to smile, but I held it in. Because I knew this wasn't just a compliment. It was a seed that would grow no matter how much my parents tried to bury it. That night, the storm broke. As soon as the last guest left and the front door shut, my father spun on me. His voice was sharp, his face red. "How dare you speak out of turn? How dare you make me look small in front of him?" I stared at him. "I didn't make you look small. I just answered his question. You should have kept quiet," he shouted. "You think you're something now? Just because some man called you boss? You're nothing without this family. Nothing." My mother chimed in, her tone less angry but more cutting. "Johnson, you need to learn your place. We gave you everything, a roof, food, education. Is this how you repay us? By humiliating us." Humiliation. That was the word they clung to. Not respect, not acknowledgement, not truth. Just their precious image. I clenched my fists, but held my voice steady. All I did was tell the truth. "You didn't want me at the table because you only wanted important people, but he saw me for who I am." "That's not my fault." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Don't you ever forget we made you. You are nothing more than the help in this house. Don't get any ideas, but the thing was, the idea was already there. For the first time I realized respect doesn't come from family titles or money or appearances. It comes from being seen for your worth. And I had just been seen. That night, lying in my small bed, I couldn't sleep. My father's anger replayed in my head. My mother's scolding echoed. But above all, the CEO's words whispered over and over, "You're the real boss here." I knew my parents would try to bury it, to push me back into silence. But I also knew something had changed. And no matter how much they hated it, there was no going back. Because deep down, they feared something more than losing their image. They feared that I might finally realize the truth. That I had the power to live without them, and once a servant knows his true worth, he never stays a servant for long. The days after the luncheon felt different. The house looked the same. The routine hadn't changed. I still cleaned the dishes, folded laundry, and ran errands. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. My parents' voices were sharper. Their eyes watched me more closely. And every time they said my name, it was laced with an edge, like they were reminding me of a cage I was supposed to stay in. The CEO's words had become a ghost in our home. My father pretended to forget them, but his behavior gave him away. He snapped at me over tiny mistakes. "Why is the glass streaked?" Why is the clock 3 minutes off? Things he would have brushed aside before now became proof that I wasn't as competent as the CEO thought. My mother, on the other hand, tried a different approach. She softened her voice, but it was manipulative. "Johnson, don't let these compliments get to your head. You're still young, you don't understand the world yet. Your father has worked hard for years. Don't overshadow him. Overshadow him." That was the fear. That one sentence from the CEO had tilted the balance of power they'd carefully guarded for years. And they were desperate to put it back. My sister, of course, wasted no time mocking me. "So, Boss Johnson," she'd say with a smirk, "should I start calling you sir?" She'd roll her eyes and laugh, making sure my parents could hear. They'd chuckle along, but their laughter was brittle, forced. At school, things weren't much better. Word had gotten around. Not because I told anyone, but because my father couldn't resist name-dropping. He twisted the story, of course. Yes, the CEO was impressed by the family. He even complimented Johnson for doing chores so well. Imagine, choris. He laughed, but the undertone was clear. He was trying to shrink my role back down, but the truth had a way of shining through. A teacher pulled me aside one afternoon. "I heard about the luncheon," she said with a smile. "It sounds like you handled yourself well. Keep at it, Johnson. You've got leadership in you." Her words lit something inside me. Leadership. That wasn't just a compliment. That was a possibility. Then something unexpected happened. A week later, the CEO himself called our home. My father answered, his voice practically dripping with eagerness. Yes, this is Malik. What an honor, sir." He went on for a while, nodding and smiling into the receiver. But then his face changed. His eyes flicked toward me and his lips tightened. "It's for you," he said flatly, holding out the phone. "For me." My heart raced as I took the receiver. "Johnson," the CEO's voice boomed warmly, "I just wanted to thank you again for your efforts the other day. You impressed me. I'd like you to visit our office sometime, maybe shadow one of my managers. See how things are run." For a moment I couldn't speak. My throat was dry, my mind spinning. Shadow a manager? Step into a world I'd only dreamed of? "Yes, sir," I managed to say. "I'd be honored." When I handed the phone back, my father's face was stone. He didn't speak for several minutes after hanging up. Finally, he muttered, "Don't let this get to your head. He's just being polite. Nothing will come of it." But I could see the fear in his eyes. The fear that someone else had noticed me, that someone outside this house was willing to offer me a door out. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the call over and over. For years, I had been trapped in a cycle of servitude, invisible, unimportant, replaceable. But now, a powerful man saw something in me my own parents refused to acknowledge, and I realized something important. Once a door is shown to you, you can't unsee it. You either step through or spend your life wondering what's on the other side. My parents sensed the shift too. The next morning, my father tightened his grip. "From now on, Johnson, you'll spend more time at home. No unnecessary trips. We need you here. Understood?" I nodded silently, but inside a fire burned. They thought they could lock me down. They thought they could control every step I took, but they didn't realize control only works on those who haven't tasted freedom. And I had tasted it. Just once, just for a moment, but it was enough. The day I walked into the CEO's office was the day my life began to change. It was a towering glass building in downtown Manhattan, the kind you see in movies, where the sunlight bounces off the windows so sharply it almost blinds you. I stood outside for a moment, clutching the visitor's pass they'd mailed me, and stared up at the massive skyscraper. My reflection in the glass doors looked so small, so ordinary, like a boy who should have been running errands instead of stepping into a corporate empire. "Johnson?" A friendly voice called my name. A tall man in a tailored suit extended his hand. "I'm Daniel, one of the managers here. The boss asked me to show you around today." I shook his hand, trying to steady my nerves. Inside, everything smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne. Employees walked briskly through marble hallways, tapping on tablets, carrying laptops, dressed like they owned the world. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. Heads turned as Daniel introduced me. This is Johnson, the young man Mr. Harrington, our CEO, mentioned after last week's luncheon. People smiled at me, some even nodded respectfully. My chest swelled, but a voice inside whispered, "This isn't your world." Not yet. Daniel took me to different departments: marketing, finance, human resources. Everyone was busy, yet they paused to greet me. I asked questions, soaking up everything like a sponge. At one point, Daniel leaned in and said, "You know, Mr. Harrington doesn't invite just anyone to shadow us. If he saw potential in you, that means something. Potential." That word hit me hard. My own parents had spent years convincing me I was just a servant in my own home. And yet here, in this gleaming tower, strangers were looking at me like I mattered. At noon, I was taken up to the top floor, the CEO's office. The doors opened to reveal a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The skyline stretched endlessly, like freedom itself. Mr. Harrington stood there, smiling as though he'd been waiting for me. "Johnson," he said warmly, "welcome. I'm glad you came. We talked for nearly an hour." He asked about school, my interests and my goals. I admitted, a little nervously, that I'd never really been allowed to think about goals. My life had been chores, routines, and obedience. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. Instead, he leaned forward and said, "Do you know what I saw in you at that luncheon? Initiative, quiet strength. Most people your age are focused on themselves. But you took responsibility. You made things work when no one else did. That's leadership." For a moment, I couldn't speak. No one had ever described me like that. Not once. Then he said something that would echo in my head for days. "Johnson, leadership isn't about where you start. It's about where you're going. And I think you're going far." By the time I left the building, the sun was setting and the city glowed gold beneath me. I felt taller somehow, as though I'd grown into the shoes I'd never been allowed to wear. But my parents' reaction, well, that was another story. When I got home, my father was waiting in the living room, arms crossed. "Where were you?" His tone was sharp, accusatory. I swallowed. "At the CEO's office. He invited me." My mother's face darkened. "You went without telling us?" "You would have stopped me," I said quietly. Silence filled the room. Then my father stood up, his jaw tight. "You're forgetting your place, Johnson. Don't think you can waltz into his office and suddenly you're somebody. You're still under my roof. You'll do as I say." His words stung, but this time I didn't lower my head. Something inside me had shifted. I'd seen another world, one where I wasn't just the maid or the errand boy. I looked him in the eye and said, "Maybe not forever." His face went red. My mother gasped. My sister snickered, but it was nervous this time. They could all feel it. The balance of power was changing. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the CEO's words. "Leadership isn't about where you start. It's about where you're going." For the first time, I believed I had a destination, and deep down I knew my parents would do everything they could to stop me from reaching it. But the thing was, I wasn't afraid anymore. The morning after I visited the CEO's office, I woke up with a strange fire in my chest. For the first time in years, I wanted to get out of bed. Not because I had chores waiting, but because I felt like life had finally opened a door just for me. But that feeling didn't last long. At breakfast, the atmosphere was heavier than usual. My mother pushed a plate of food toward me without making eye contact. My father sat at the head of the table, his fingers drumming on the wood, his gaze sharp. "Johnson," he said finally, "about yesterday, I braced myself. You embarrassed us." His tone was clipped, like every word was a nail hammered into my chest. "Running off to some CEO's office without our permission. What do you think people will say? That we can't even control our own son?" I frowned. Why would anyone care? It was my invitation. "He wanted me there," my sister snorted. "Please! Do you really think someone like him cares about you? He probably felt sorry for you, that's all." I clenched my fists under the table, my appetite gone. My mother finally spoke. "Listen to your father, Johnson. Don't go around thinking you're special. People like us don't belong in those kinds of places. People like us." The words hit me like a slap. They weren't just putting me down. They were putting down themselves, too. like they'd already accepted being small, invisible, unimportant, and they wanted me to accept it too, but I couldn't, not anymore. Later that day, I overheard something that made my stomach twist. My parents were in the living room, their voices hushed, but the walls in our house were thin. "He's getting ideas in his head," my father muttered. "I know," my mother replied, her voice sharp. "If he keeps this up, he'll think he doesn't need us anymore. That CEO will fill his head with nonsense. Better to shut this down before it gets out of control." I froze in the hallway. Shut this down. What did they mean by that? The idea that my own parents, the people who were supposed to want the best for me, were plotting against me, sent a chill through my veins. For the first time, I realized something terrifying. They didn't just see me as a son. To them, I was a property. Someone to command, someone to control. If I rose above, their grip would slip. And they couldn't let that happen. That evening, I got a call from Daniel, the manager who had shown me around the skyscraper. His voice was cheerful. "Johnson, the CEO wants you to attend a small dinner this weekend. Just a few executives, casual, nothing formal. He thought it would be a great chance for you to meet more people in the industry." I felt my chest swell again, that fire returning. I'd love to, but when I hung up the phone, my father was standing in the doorway, his eyes narrow. "Who was that?" I swallowed. "Work, the CEO's office." His jaw tightened. "You cancel it," I blinked. "What? Why?" "Because I said so. You're not running off to play dress-up with rich men who don't care about you. You belong here." "No," I said firmly, surprising even myself. "I belong where I'm invited, and I'm not going to miss it." His face turned red, his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he was going to hit me. My mother grabbed his arm, whispering, "Not now." But his eyes told me everything. This was war. The night of the dinner. I dressed in the only decent suit I had, borrowed from a cousin, a little too loose at the shoulders. As I reached for the door, my mother stood blocking the way. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "Those people don't want you. They'll use you and throw you away." I looked her straight in the eye. "Maybe, but I'd rather be used by people who see my worth than live like a ghost in my own house." Her lips tightened. But she stepped aside. When I walked into the CEO's dinner that night, everything changed again. The executives weren't just polite. They listened when I spoke. They asked my opinion on things, laughed at my jokes, treated me like an equal. And in that golden-lit room, surrounded by people who saw me as more than just a servant, I made a silent promise to myself. I would never go back to being invisible, but what I didn't know was that my parents weren't done. Not by a long shot. They had already started planning their next move, a move that could destroy everything I was building. When I returned from the CEO's dinner, my heart was light, my mind buzzing with possibilities. For once, I felt like I belonged to a world that was bigger than my small, suffocating house. But as soon as I stepped inside, that feeling shattered. My father was waiting in the living room, arms crossed, his face as hard as stone. My mother sat beside him, silent but sharp, her eyes narrowed like knives. "Well," my father demanded, "how was your little fantasy dinner? Did you enjoy pretending to be one of them?" I didn't respond. I was too tired for another fight. I moved toward the stairs, but his voice cut through the air like a whip. "Don't you walk away from me, Johnson. We are your parents. You will listen." I turned slowly, and I did listen. For years. I listened when you told me I was nothing. I listened when you said my dreams were useless. But tonight, I paused, my voice firm. Tonight, people listened to me. And it felt good. My father's face turned crimson. My mother whispered something under her breath, something I couldn't catch. But I could feel it. This wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was hostility. The next morning, the sabotage began. I arrived at the CEO's office for a follow-up meeting, but something felt strange. The receptionist, usually warm and polite, seemed hesitant as she checked me in. Her smile was tight, her voice flat. "Mr. Johnson, the CEO is running late. Please wait." As I sat in the waiting area, I noticed a man whispering to another, both of them glancing at me with suspicion. Anxiety gnawed at me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Finally, Daniel, the manager who had first welcomed me, appeared. He looked uncomfortable. "Johnson, can I speak with you privately?" My heart sank. We stepped into a side office and he closed the door. "I don't know how to say this, but your parents came here this morning." My head snapped up. "What?" He nodded grimly. "They demanded to see the CEO. Said you were lying, that you were unstable, that you've been causing trouble at home. They insisted you're trying to trick him into giving you opportunities you don't deserve." I felt the blood drain from my face. They actually said that?" Daniel sighed. "Yes, it was awkward. The CEO didn't take them seriously. He told them he'd make his own judgments, but it left a bad taste. Not everyone in this building is as open-minded as he is." Whispers spread quickly. I sat down, my hands trembling. My own parents had come into my new world, my sanctuary, just to poison it. That evening, I confronted them. "Why?" My voice cracked as I stood in the kitchen, staring at both of them. "Why would you go there? Why would you try to ruin this for me?" My mother looked away, her arms folded. My father's gaze was steady, cold. "Because you're forgetting your place," he said flatly. "This nonsense needs to stop before you embarrass us all." "Embarrass you?" I choked out a bitter laugh. "Do you even hear yourselves? You're not protecting me. You're protecting your control. You want me to stay small because you can't stand the thought of me growing. Don't twist this, Johnson," my mother snapped. "We're saving you from humiliation. Those people aren't your friends. They'll laugh at you behind your back." "No," I said firmly. "The only ones laughing at me are standing right in front of me." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. If I kept letting my parents dictate my life, they'd destroy every chance I had before it even began. I had two choices: stay quiet, keep being their servant, or break free completely, no matter the cost. And deep down, I already knew which choice I was going to make. The next day, the CEO himself called me into his office. "Johnson," he said, his voice steady but kind, "I want you to know something. I don't care what others say. I see potential in you. But you need to decide, are you ready to leave behind the things that hold you down? Because opportunities like this don't come twice." His words struck deep. He wasn't just offering me a chance. He was offering me freedom. And at that moment, I silently vowed I would no longer let my parents define me. What I didn't know was that their attempts to sabotage me weren't over. They were just getting started, and their next move would hit harder than anything before. The following week, I began noticing subtle changes at school and in the neighborhood. Whispers followed me in the hallways. Smirks, half-hidden glances, even friends avoiding me for no reason. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized it wasn't. My parents had begun their campaign quietly, behind closed doors, spreading lies to anyone who would listen. "Johnson," my father said one evening, voice low and dangerous, "you think you can walk into someone else's world and be admired. You'll find out soon enough that people like us, people like you, don't belong there." I looked at him steadily. "People like me?" I repeated, my voice calm. "The only thing that makes me different is that someone actually noticed my effort. And that scares you." My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Be careful what you say. You're forgetting who provides for you." For a moment, I considered retreating, letting them win. But I couldn't. Not anymore. The next morning, Daniel called me at school. His voice was tense. "Johnson, something happened. Some people from your neighborhood, they've been spreading rumors about you, saying you've been dishonest, trying to manipulate the CEO. Even a few colleagues have heard it. We don't know why, but it seems coordinated." I felt my stomach tighten. My own parents were attacking me, publicly. How is that possible?" I asked, barely breathing. Daniel hesitated. "I don't want to accuse anyone, but I know your family has been involved in business circles here. Someone must have contacted them. You need to be careful." I nodded slowly. My mind raced. This was more than manipulation. This was strategy. A deliberate attempt to strip me of every opportunity I had fought to earn. That evening, I confronted them again. "You've gone too far," I said, my voice shaking but controlled. "You've started lying about me. You've spread rumors. You've tried to destroy my reputation," my father scoffed. "Reputation?" You think you have one? You're nothing. People like us, people like you, are powerless. I'm only trying to protect you. Protect me, I repeated, my patience snapping. You're protecting your ego, your image. You don't care about me. You never did. My mother's eyes flashed, a mixture of fear and anger. We raised you. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us? By betraying us? Betrayal? I said, my voice icy. The only betrayal here is you trying to keep me trapped. I'm done being invisible. I'm done being your servant. You can't stop me from stepping into the life I deserve. Their faces twisted with rage, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. The next day, I returned to the CEO's office. My parents had tried to poison the waters, but Daniel and Mr. Harrington saw through it. The CEO looked at me as I entered. Johnson, he said, his tone serious, I heard there's been some chatter. Don't let it get to you. I want to be clear. Your performance and potential are what matter here. Nothing else. Relief washed over me. But I knew the real battle wasn't over. My parents wouldn't stop. Not until they had tried every possible method to control me. As I sat at the conference table, I realized something important. They thought they had power over me. That by spreading lies, they could pull me back into the shadows. But they didn't understand one crucial fact. Once someone discovers their worth, no rumor, no lie, no family pressure can erase it. I leaned back in my chair, taking in the sleek office around me. The city skyline stretched beyond the windows, golden in the late afternoon sun. And for the first time, I felt something I had never felt before. Freedom. I knew the next move would be theirs. And I had to be ready, because the closer they got, the higher I had to rise, and little did they know. The moment of their reckoning was approaching. The tension at home was unbearable. Every glance from my parents felt like an accusation, every word like a trap. But something had shifted inside me. I no longer trembled at their authority. The fire that had been quietly building over the years was ready to ignite. It started with small things. I began keeping records of my achievements, the CEO's compliments, emails from Daniel, notes from colleagues who appreciated my input. Each piece was a reminder. I was no longer invisible, and the world outside saw my worth. My parents, meanwhile, continued their schemes. They invited relatives over, whispered lies about me, and subtly hinted that I was untrustworthy. But now their tactics barely scratched me. I smiled politely, nodded, and let them think their poison was working, while quietly preparing my response. One evening, my father summoned me to the living room. "Johnson," he said, his voice cold but controlled, "we need to talk about your recent behavior. You're acting out of line. People have been questioning your judgment. You're forgetting your place." I leaned back, calm and deliberate. "Really? And who has been questioning it?" "Because I think the CEO, Daniel, and everyone I work with would disagree. It seems your perception of my place is outdated," my mother gasped. My father's face tightened. For the first time, I sensed hesitation in their armor. Then I said the words I had practiced countless times in my mind. "You see, I spent years obeying your rules, following your orders, keeping silent while you treated me like a servant. But I've learned something. Respect is not demanded. It's earned. And I've earned it. From people who truly matter, not just those who call themselves family." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged a look, a mixture of fury and fear. They realized finally that the Johnson they had tried to suppress was gone. In his place stood someone who could no longer be contained. The next step came when I invited Daniel to our home under the guise of discussing a weekend project. My parents had no idea. When he arrived, his presence alone changed the atmosphere. He greeted me warmly and then, without warning, complimented the house's organization, directly crediting me for its efficiency. "Johnson," he said with a smile, "you've done a remarkable job maintaining everything." "It's impressive." My parents froze. My father's jaw dropped. My mother's lips quivered. My sister looked as though she'd just swallowed a bitter pill. It was subtle, but the effect was immediate. The power balance had shifted. Their carefully constructed facade of authority and control cracked under the weight of truth. I realized then that revenge didn't have to be loud or destructive. Sometimes the quiet assertion of one's worth was the sharpest weapon. Over the following days, I continued to assert myself. I took on more responsibilities at the CEO's office, received more praise, and attended high-level meetings. Meanwhile, my parents tried every trick in their arsenal: guilt, manipulation, subtle intimidation. But their tactics no longer worked. Each success of mine, no matter how small, was a reminder that their control over me was an illusion. One evening, as I reviewed the week's accomplishments, my father muttered under his breath, "I don't know what to do anymore. He's unstoppable." I heard him, but I didn't respond. I simply smiled to myself. The fire had grown into something uncontainable, and then it hit me. The final reckoning was near. Their attempts to control me, to diminish me, had only prepared me for the moment I would finally take charge. The moment when respect, long denied, would be demanded, not by force but by undeniable truth. Because sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon, and patience the deadliest form of revenge. The weekend arrived, and with it the perfect opportunity. My CEO had arranged a networking event, a casual gathering of top executives, managers, and rising talents. Normally, it would have been intimidating, but for the first time, I felt like I belonged, not just because of the invitations, but because I had earned my place. When I mentioned the event to my parents, I expected resistance. But surprisingly, my father's tone was wary, not overtly hostile. "Just don't embarrass yourself," he muttered. My mother nodded, adding, "Remember who you are." Those words, meant to intimidate, only fueled me. I had already discovered something important. They could try to control the environment, but they could never control the perception of others. Once I proved myself. The night of the event, I arrived early. The room buzzed with energy. Conversations about projects, successes, and future plans filled the air. I immediately noticed how differently people treated me here compared to my parents' house. Here I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just Johnson. I was a valued participant, someone whose voice mattered. Daniel spotted me and greeted me warmly. "Johnson, everyone's excited to see you. Mr. Harrington told them about your work and how you handled the recent challenges so professionally." I smiled, thanking him quietly. My eyes scanned the room, taking in the interactions, the confident professionals, the sense of belonging. It was intoxicating. Then it happened. My father and mother had somehow managed to attend, under the guise of visiting a relative. They lingered near the entrance, clearly expecting me to stumble, to be humiliated in public. But instead, the opposite happened. One of the senior executives approached me, extending a hand. "Johnson, I heard about your project. The initiative you took. Incredible. You're making a real impact here." Another nodded, adding, "Yes, the CEO speaks highly of you. You've got a rare talent for organization and leadership. Most young people your age aren't ready for this level of responsibility." I felt a surge of satisfaction. My parents' faces tightened. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's polite smile faltered. They had tried to diminish me, to sabotage me. Yet here I was, being recognized for the very qualities they refused to see in me for years. I greeted them politely, shaking their hands with controlled calm. "Thank you for coming," I said. My father opened his mouth, probably to scold, but I didn't wait for him. Instead, I turned to the CEO, who gave me a subtle nod, approving of my poise and confidence. By the end of the evening, the effect was clear. Executives were seeking my opinion, consulting me on minor decisions, including me in conversations that my parents would have thought were too advanced for someone like me. Every nod, every acknowledgement was a quiet victory, a reminder that respect is earned, not demanded. Later, outside the venue, my father's voice was barely a whisper. How did you do that?" I looked at him steadily. I stopped listening to the voice that told me I was nothing. I started listening to the people who actually see me. "That's all." My mother shook her head, disbelief etched across her face. You've changed. You're confident, arrogant." "Not arrogant," I said, taking a deep breath. confident. And I won't let anyone, not even you, erase that. For the first time, I realized the depth of my own power. Not through anger or revenge alone, but through persistence, skill, and patience. They had tried to define me, to contain me, to control me, and they had failed. The walk home was quiet. My parents said little, their usual tactics of scolding and manipulation silenced by the undeniable truth. The Johnson they had tried to suppress was no longer a boy hiding in the shadows. I was visible. I was recognized. I was unstoppable. And deep down, I knew that the moment of full reckoning, the day when they would truly understand the consequences of underestimating me, was only a matter of time. Because respect, once earned, is a power no one can take away. The weeks following the networking event changed everything. My parents, once confident in their control over me, had grown silent. Their whispers, manipulations, and subtle sabotage no longer had power. Every attempt to undermine me had only revealed my strength. They had underestimated me for years, and now the reality was undeniable. It started with small victories. Promotions at the CEO's office, public acknowledgement for my projects, invitations to exclusive meetings, each accomplishment a quiet reminder that my worth was not defined by my family's approval. And each time I walked into rooms where they could see me, knowing they had no choice but to watch as I rose higher. The final moment came unexpectedly. It was the day of an important corporate conference. I'd been invited to speak in front of several high-ranking executives. My parents had caught wind of it and tried one last time to intimidate me. "You're going too far, Johnson," my father warned. His voice tight with suppressed anger. I looked him in the eye and said, calmly but firmly, "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And for the first time, I'm in control of my own life." That day, standing on the stage, facing a crowd of influential people, I realized something powerful. Respect is earned, not demanded. Authority is proven through action, not fear. And freedom comes when you stop letting others define you. When I finished speaking, the applause was thunderous. People I had only met days before approached me, congratulating me, asking for advice, seeking collaboration. It was surreal. The life I had only dreamed of as a servant at home was now my reality. I glanced at the back of the room. My parents had come, curious, worried, powerless. Their expressions told me everything. They had tried to keep me small, to break my spirit, to manipulate my life. But all they had done was forge the person I was meant to become, and in that moment I felt a quiet, satisfying victory. Back at home, the atmosphere had shifted permanently. My parents no longer tried to assert dominance. Their lectures had stopped. My sister no longer mocked me. I was no longer their maid or their property. I was Johnson, respected, capable, unstoppable. I understood finally that revenge is not always about confrontation. Sometimes it's about proving yourself quietly, persistently, and strategically. It's about turning the tables without losing your dignity. And for anyone who ever felt powerless, overlooked, or underestimated, the key is patience, persistence, and knowing your worth, because when you finally step into your own light, even those who once tried to hold you down can only watch. Thank you for joining me on this journey on Mine's Sweet Revenge. If Johnson's story inspired you, made you think, or gave you that spark to stand up for yourself, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Mine's Sweet Revenge for more real-life stories of courage, resilience, and unexpected triumph. Comment below, have you ever been underestimated or treated unfairly like Johnson? I'd love to hear your story. Remember this, sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest, and respect earned is the ultimate form of revenge.